Hello everyone, this is Satyaprakash. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'll describe how to know about Git Ignore and its uses in GitHub. This is the part 22 of GitHub tutorial. I'll suggest you before going through this part 22, before you should visit my part 21 of my Git and GitHub tutorial, that is check log history of Git branches using GitHub and Git bash. So in this part 22, what we'll know, that is what is Git Ignore, why should I use .git ignore, steps to ignore files without committing to Git or GitHub, steps to use .git ignore file. So what is Git Ignore and why we need it? The .git ignore file is a text file that commands Git which files or folders to ignore in a project. So I'll give an example that if I'm working on a .NET project and after compilation of code some system generated class files will be generated, right? So these system generated class files I don't want to commit to the GitHub repository. So all the developers connected to this repository should not commit these class files to the GitHub repository. So let's understand with an example. I need to go to my repository what we have we are working earlier in my last video, that is the part 21. So here on in the Satya2 repository there are files called myfile.cs and myfile2.cs. So what I will do here, I need to modify the myfile2.cs and add one new property. So for that I'll open in a notepad in the edit mode, and here I'll add one property. So instead write everything, I just copy this one and paste here, and I'll modify this property name, that is the Git Ignore. So Git Ignore is the property name, and save the changes and close this one. So here I'll create another new file in the same directory using extension, that is the .log, and the file name is systemgen.log. Alright, so what I'll do for that, create a new log file, right click new and text document here. So I just click here the new document, select file, save as, and I'll make this name of this file called systemgen. But here save as type I'll select as all files, and I need this file extension should be .log. So I mention here .log here and save the changes. Alright, so I just delete this previous one, new text document. I don't need this anymore, and you can see that systemgen, it is a log file. How to know that it is a log file? So here I just right click on that, go to properties, and you can see that text document is the log file, type of file is .log, and if you go to the details the name is systemgen.log. so it is a log file now. It is a log extension. We can create this successfully. Now I will check the status as shown. So what I need to do to check the status, I right click here, git bash, so here I'll add one I need to go to the main branch, right? Switch to the main branch. So switch to main branch, what I'll do, get git checkout and the main branch name. So my branch is successfully switched from testing to main here. So I need to check the status of this directory. So you can see that after modified this files myfile2.cs, we can see here the modified file called myfile2.cs and the new file called systemgen.log. So here we can see that systemgen.log file under the untracked files, but I don't want to commit this file to the local Git repository. So I want to create another file with extension .gitignore called systemgen.gitignore, because if I put the systemgen.log file inside the systemgen.gitignore, then the Git does not allow us to commit this systemgen.log file. Also in Git status, this file called systemgen.log will not be shown. So I don't want to commit these files whose extensions are .log. Then in .gitignore file we'd have to add one star .log file. Like this .NET project, there is some files we don't want to commit to Git. That means some system generated files during compilation of project. So in this way we can ignore these files. So in such cases we don't need to add all the unwanted files to .gitignore. So automatically the GitHub will generate that .gitignore file at the time of repository creation itself. So next I'll show you a new GitHub repository with .gitignore, how to generate one .gitignore file. So for that, what I'll do, I go to my repository and here I'll create a new GitHub repo. So here I click here and a new repository. So here the repository name I'll mention here as systemgen ignore and repo. So with here I mention the GitHub repository name is systemgen ignore repo, and I will mention here as the description is it ignores all log file in the GitHub repository. So I will mention it as it ignores all log file. It ignores all log files in the GitHub repository. Alright, so here the repository type should be public, and after then initialize this repository with some options here. So I need this readme file, and I also need this .ignore, so .gitignore. So as I have described earlier how to add .gitignore, so you need to check these files, check this option, that is the add .gitignore. So it will create a .gitignore file for us. So here is the template is showing here, it is none now. So what I'll do here in this GitHub repository with proper selections and other options, so here we need to add .gitignore and the template should be as Java. So you can see that Java is selected here. Now you can Java is selected here as I selected in the template. Then I'll create here the repository button. Then after successful creation of this GitHub repository, we'll get one interface is shown here. So here you can see that readme.md file and .gitignore is created, right, as I have selected the options during creation of GitHub repository. So now I go to this .gitignore details. I'll just click here. So it will open the .gitignore file on this repository. So here we can see some extensions to which the .gitignore block those to commit. So here you can see that some log file, right? So under in this .ignore we can block these extensions. So as for our requirements, we need to block this .log extension file during commit. Okay, now the same way I want to create another repo. So again I'll click here, go to new repository. Alright, So here I created another new repo, GitHub repo, that is the system gen ignore vs is nothing but the Visual Studio, and the name is repo. Alright, so here also we need to do the same thing. It ignores the description section. I need to put that it ignores all log files, for this GitHub repository. So this is my description section of this repo. Alright, so after then I need to select as the repository type is public, and same way I need to select here readme file and .git ignore, and here in the GitHub template I need to add .git ignore, and the template should be chosen as the Visual Studio. So here I will select here Visual Studio in the template, and you can see here Visual Studio is added successfully in the .git ignore template section, and I need to click here create repository. So after then we have successfully created the GitHub repository called system gen ignore vs repo, and here the files are created during creation, that is the .git ignore and readme.md file initial commits. So now I go to this .git ignore here on this repo, and here you can see some extensions which we will block those during the commit. So here some extensions are there, that is the user specific files, some .user, .sln, .doc states. It is related to Visual Studio. Here some comments are given, that ignore Visual Studio temporary files, build results, and files generated by the popular Visual Studio and add-ons, right? And here some user specific files you can need to block during creation, some benchmark results, build results of an ATL project and .NET Core project, and files built by Visual Studio. And here you can see that in files built by Visual Studio there is one extensions are there, .log. So .log extensions are not allowed to commit in this .git ignore file. If I clone this repository, then the .git ignore does not allow the log extension files to commit to the GitHub repository. It will block those to commit. Okay, now I'll go to my this repository, and I'll go here and go to my this one. Okay, I just close this. Alright, so here what I'll do, I just right click on the GitHub repository on the directory and select the Git bash here. So now I'll clone this system gen ignore vs repo, whose .git ignore template is chosen as Visual Studio. Okay, so I'll clone this and just select this one, copied, and to clone I open this git bash. So git clone and space here, I just clone again, copy this one. So go to my git bash here, so I paste this URL here and select enter. So it will clone this repository to my local. So it is successfully cloned, and I can see here this repository here, system gen ignore vs repository. Alright, so if I clone this system gen ignore vs repo whose .git ignore template is chosen as Visual Studio, and I try to commit any changes to this, so I will not be able to commit any of these files with extensions that is the log extension file cannot be committed to GitHub repository. So I want to check the .git ignore in systemgen ignore vs repo git repo using git bash. So here the .git ignore is a hidden file here. So to show the hidden files we use a command called, so if I'll select here ls, again I need to close this, and here I'll open the git bash here in the systemgen ignore Visual Studio repo. Alright, so here I'll put here ls for list of files. So we can see that only readme.md file is shown here, and why .git ignore is not showing, because it is a hidden file. So to show the hidden file, what I'll do to show the hidden files, we use a command called ls -la. So instead of ls, so using git bash. So after then I click enter. Now we can see that the hidden files is showing here .git ignore here, right? And so it show the hidden files for us by using this command, and there is the .git ignore file it's showing here in this directory, that's the systemgen ignore Visual Studio repo. Now I created two files called fast.cs and systemgen.log. Alright, so what I'll do, fast.cs file, I'll just copy here from another repository, copy this one, my file.cs, and paste here, and here I'll change this file name, that is the fast.cs. Alright, and here also I copy the systemgen.log file what I have created earlier, so no need to create again. I just copy these two files to my new repository here, right? This is the class file and this is the log file. Now you can see that this is the log file. So here if I check the status, then only the fast.cs file is shown, because .git ignore file does not allow this systemgen.log file is ready to commit status. But in the list of files details, the systemgen.log file is shown, but not for commit purpose. So I'll show you here. So I'll put here ls. Now you can see that in the list details files under this repo, these three files is showing here: fast.cs, readme.md file, and systemgen.log file. Alright, but here if I'll check the status here, so in the check status only the on-track file, that is the fast.cs, is showing, but the systemgen.log file it is not showing. Okay, because the .git ignore file does not allow this systemgen.log file is ready to commit status. As I described earlier, that this .git ignore file, there is one extension called log, right? So here I already have cloned this repository to my local here, and in this local .git ignore file is available in my local repository in a hidden format, and here this .git ignore does not allow the log extension files. That's why when I created my systemgen.log file and check the status, so systemgen.log file it is not showing here due to .git ignore file does not allow the log file extensions, logs extension related files. Only the fast.cs is showing under on-track files. That's why I need only I need to commit these files to the GitHub repository, not systemgen.log file. Alright, and here also .git ignore hide the log files for commit. So systemgen.log file, it is not showing here because of .git ignore. It hides all the log files for commit. So in this way, if I'll create another extension, that is .scss, and if I'll clone this repository to my local, and if I'll create here another file with extensions, that is .scc, then if I'll check the status here, the .git ignore hide all the .scc files for commit. So here all the developers who are connected to this systemgen ignore Visual Studio repo cannot commit the log files. Like this log file, we can restrict the file extensions as shown in the .git ignore files by selecting the Visual Studio template files. When I create the repository, at that time we have selected the Visual Studio template, right, during creation. So as per Visual Studio, we can block these files during commit these changes to our GitHub repository using git bash. Okay, so now I'll go to my presentation here. So what is Git Ignore? The .git ignore file is a text file that commands Git which files or folders to ignore in a project. A local .git ignore file is usually placed in the root directory of a project. You can also create a global .git ignore file, and any entries in that file will be ignored in all of your Git repositories. So what we have learned today in this video: what is Git Ignore file, why should I use .git ignore to block the not required files to commit these changes to our GitHub repository. For example, in the .NET project there is some system generated files there, so we don't want to commit these files to our GitHub repository. For that scenario, we want to use the .git ignore file. And how to select this template like Java, PHP or Visual Studio during creation of our GitHub repository. So according to that, in that .git ignore there is some extensions or files there through which we can block these file extensions during commit. So .git ignore hide all these file extensions during commit this file to our GitHub repository. So steps to ignore files without committing to a Git or GitHub, and steps to use .git ignore file. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.